My name is Tony Mucker, and we do these about once a month where we invite a third-party expert and a partner of ours to come in and share on topics that we believe are important for us. And so today we have a couple of our friends. We're going to be talking about how to engineer for obsession, how to develop a useful customer feedback loop. Okay, thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to have two of our friends from Rethink Labs, Holden Munson and Sofia Maravich. They're co-founders of Rethink Labs that helps with customer operations. And actually, Holden is a former Mucker co-founder, and I'm sure she could share her experience around that. But again, without further ado, Holden, Sofia, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tony. Happy to be here. We'll have some questions for you guys as we go. So, please do chat in and answer those questions. We'll try and customize this to kind of your needs. So there will be a time to listen for that. We'd love to help as much as we can and make this, useful for you guys. So my name's Holden Munson. As Tony mentioned, I was a Mucker founder 11 years ago. Before that, I went through Y Combinator with another company and have since then run operations, strategy, and customer experience for a handful of startups, mostly in LA. My last in-house role was at LeBron James supplement brand Ladder, where I ran customer experience and operations. And about 4.5 years ago, we started Rethink Labs to help teams of all stages unblock their issues that are preventing growth. That's kind of what we focus on. So we do all stages and all industries, and we think that lets us learn a lot and be able to share those learnings more effectively with our clients. So I'll let Sofia introduce herself as well.
Yeah, hi, Sofia Maravich. I joined Holden about 6 months ago to partner up on Rethink. And prior to that, I started my career on the advertising agency. So spent the first 4 years there, switched over to the tech side in 2014, and I have worked for and come in at some, earlier stage companies. So one was right after the seed round, another was a Series A. Basically spent a ton of time helping those companies grow and scale. And within that, build out a lot of different teams and functions, all related to the customer experience and the bottom line impacting revenue growth and retention. In my, spare time too, I am a member of Chief, and I also mentor through some other incubators and just really love to work with companies to help, get in those earlier stages and help them scale and grow. So love doing that work, love to help others, and super excited to be here to talk to you guys today.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about customer feedback loops. We're going to use that generic term, but this also includes product usage data, of course. We're going to walk through who owns it, why it matters, most importantly, how to integrate that into your team in an ongoing, effective way. And then we'll jump into some examples on the B2B side and consumer side. And that'll be a time where you guys can actually write in and share if there's a specific challenge that you're navigating. And if you're on the B2B side or B2C side, then we can kind of tailor those examples for you. So if there's a lagging metric, if there's some sort of churn, retention issue, chat those in. It gives us a little more context and we can customize that for you.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right, so what we're going to start with is, what is the customer feedback loop? And to give the dictionary definition here, it's the tools and processes to collect and analyze key customer data from product usage to reviews. What that actually looks like when you break it down, we have this great graph that gets into the components. And as you'll see here, there's 5 stages of it. And, quickly to go over these, the first is asking. So what do you actually want to know from your customers? Prompting the right information will give you such great results. And just, taking the time to listen and ask questions and get into the why, that will just give you such great insight. So there's this ask component. The second is collecting it. So once you start asking all these things, tools to collect it is incredibly helpful. And we'll go over what some of those are throughout this presentation, but that is basically like, where does that information live? When you get into step 3, or analyzing and planning, that is where you're going to get into leveraging your reporting. And so now that you have all this data you've collected, you've asked all these questions, what reporting are you going to have to actually leverage it? That's super critical. And that takes you into implementation. So from there, once you know, the results that you're seeing, you have some insights, you have this data, you can action off of it. And that is where you can use that to leverage and determine broader business goals, product features, even put, things back into your sales materials that you're hearing. There's just so many great ways to leverage this information that we'll go over throughout this presentation. And then lastly, the notify stage. And this one I think often gets underutilized, but is so, so important because the notification stage is where you're telling customers, hey, like we listened to you, we heard you, we get it, and we did something about it. And literally even just using that language with customers goes such a long way. The more that you can demonstrate to them that there is feedback being collected and that you hear them and you're using it, the more they're going to give it to you. So can't emphasize that one enough. And again, when we get into some examples, we'll talk about this whole loop, but of course it's a loop for a reason. You always want to be talking to your customers. You always be wanting to get feedback from them. And that is just going to help propel your business forward tenfold. So when it comes to the components of what actually makes up a customer feedback loop, these are the common areas that you will find. So surveys, interviews and focus groups, things like asking sentiment. So how did you feel about this? It can go so far as reviews on other sites or third-party sites to validate or verify the experience somebody has had. It gets into customer support data. So literally when, I have an issue and I submit a ticket, how was my experience? Was that positive? Was it negative? Immediate action items to address. With documentation and training, if you are a B2B SaaS company and you have, a lot of documentation for your clients, like, are they leveraging it? Can they go in and, and use it? Or do they find it useful? Things like in-app and chat, you can look at those questions to see what people are saying. Same thing with reviews, similar to social. What's the sentiment out there? What are your customers saying about your product or saying about your brand? That's huge. That's so important. People pay attention to that. You want that to be positive. When it comes to, again, B2B SaaS, things like QBRs are another great place to get that feedback. And then, of course, any product usage data that you have, whether you're using a tool to track it or you have, some in-product capabilities there. Of course, you want to see how your product's actually being leveraged. And two other things on here that, become more anecdotal or, things that you kind of go by what you hear. One is direct feedback. So literally what your customers tell you on a day-to-day basis, you really want to pay attention to that. So it might be like, hey, I talked to 4 customers this week. They all asked the same question. If they're all asking the same question, that means they're all, not understanding something, right? So then that can be something that you then go back and address. So capturing that direct feedback, and we'll talk about that, but it's so important. And also listening to your internal employees. I see this one get missed so often or quickly dismissed so often where it's like, oh, the team, they don't know as much as like our customers do. So we're not going to, we're kind of going to disregard that feedback. And honestly, like that's not the right way to look at it. If your internal team can't figure out how to do something or they're confused or they don't get it, you can be rest assured that your customers are going to have that same exact experience. So that's why you want to make sure when it comes to these things too, that you are listening internally as well, especially to the teams that are customer facing and do get those questions and do have to explain things. When they don't get it, your customers won't. So these are all the different areas. And again, we'll talk, more about some of these as we go through, but those are the typical components of where you'll find this feedback.
And of course, importantly, why does it matter? How we think about it is first and foremost customer retention. We all know it's easier to keep a customer and more cost effective than it is to go find a new one. Secondly, this customer experience component is really important for LTV, for referrals, and actually for internal team culture. I think this is one that has surprised us over the years of actually the impact that this can have. When teams know that customers are happy, they feel like they're winning, things are going well, and the morale boost that we can get out of having this connection to customers and also knowing when it's going really well is exceptionally important. When teams get really disconnected from their users, you'll see that disconnection in their work productivity as well. And lastly, this actually makes you data-driven. All teams, want to be this way, of course, especially nowadays, but actually this is where it gets real. So taking this data, which there's so much available now, which is kind of the challenge we think for teams, especially right now, is actually knowing what's important and thinking about this data in terms of actually helping you answer questions and make decisions. Data just for collection's sake is not interesting, but actually how do you use it to impact the business? So making sure that you're collecting the right information that actually can answer core questions, like what features or offering is working well? What's keeping customers engaged in the platform or product? What should product or engineering teams be prioritizing, right? These are the important questions and others that this data will be informing.
So who owns it? When it comes to whoever owns this, the thing that we always like to suggest is that it should be the team or the person who's ultimately responsible for owning client relationships post-sale. And, obviously that could be a founder, a COO, head of CX, CRO, that type, but also it, could be another title. It doesn't have to be that. What's important though, is that they have a pulse on the client and they are the ones out on the front line. And when you think about this role and who is actually owning this, you want it to be focused around a project manager type-esque function. You don't want this person to say, well, I'm the one that owns it. So since I own it, I'm the authority on it. That's not fair, because customer feedback, like we'll talk about and mention, it's everybody's business. It's everybody's responsibility. So it just can't be one person dictating it, but you do need one good person to project manage it. So they need to be the one that, works to help make sure all these tools are in place and everything, is working, so that they can then put the analysis together and they can come up with findings and they can come up with insights, and that can be disseminated across the company and everybody's clear on, what the outputs are and what we're hearing. So that's really important. But again, you want them to just kind of PM that. You don't want them to be the authority of that.
I'm going to ask a question on behalf of our early stage founders, if you don't mind. So many of the companies that I typically spend a lot of those in our accelerator program, or just simply at seed stage where it's founder-led go-to-market, or perhaps they may have hired one go-to-market person, whether it's a growth or marketing background, or a salesperson, and just that's their main focus. So given that kind of context, and I know there's several of those types of companies listening right now, there's a previous slide had that matrix of 12, 15 different things you could do to collect customer feedback. And then you're suggesting is that, think of this as a project manager role. It just sounds like a lot. So what would you guys recommend for super busy founders of companies that have to put out fires and make sure there's cash in the bank and all these other things that are top of mind while prioritizing for customer feedback? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so we'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on, but I think at a high level, this can absolutely be founder-led. You don't need to have a CRO in place before you are collecting useful information and leveraging that to improve the product that you're offering. The founder is the perfect person to be owning this right now. If there's multiple founders, find the one who has slightly less on their plate, right? This is a great CEO role. This person is helping think about it as a cross-functional group. So there might only be 3 people on the team, but ultimately they're holding more than one kind of hat in those roles. And we want to have the time and space, and that could be 10 to 15 minutes a week. This does not have to be an hour-long analysis every Friday afternoon. This can be a 10-minute stand-up on Mondays where you're looking at the key dashboard metrics, and we're talking about 10 metrics, fewer, that can be for that quarter or for that month, that those are the important things that are driving the business goals at the time. And those key metrics are absolutely going to be likely product usage information, sales information, reviews, direct feedback, that kind of core user client feedback, and collecting it, disseminating it, even if it's just a small team gathering for 10 minutes a week to talk about it. It really keeps everyone so connected. And I know, and Sophia knows, those early days, there's so much going on and there's so many challenges, and you're spread so thin, but this really helps teams be diligent and learn the discipline that they'll need later on. Because if you stay that fragmented in what's important and trying to do it all, that just doesn't scale. And so learning some of the fundamentals of having that diligence in carving out that time on a weekly basis to review and stay close to the users will be really effective, even in those early days.
Yeah. And like Holden was saying, like, it also just helps you prioritize, right? So again, in one of the examples I was talking about, if like 10 customers are telling you this, like, oh, then, shoot, like that's a problem, right? If half our customers feel this way, we should do something about it. So it can definitely, just help you with that too.
Okay, great. We did have a follow-up question come from the audience related to this. If you're going to address it later on in your presentation, great. I don't want to derail your guys' flow. But the question, if you only had that 10 to 15 minutes, how do you utilize that effectively? So, are there certain processes or certain things? You mentioned KPIs and dashboards that you how do you take advantage of if you only have that amount of time every week?
I think we'll dive in deeply into the examples, but at a high level, keeping that short and sweet, effective dashboard, which can change, right? Like quarter to quarter, month to month, you might be having, your top few metrics. Those will probably be different as that top goal, but it kind of gets back to the idea of a goal setting process. Even in the early stages, actually knowing what's important right now, either, business risks that you're trying to disprove, core user metrics that you're aiming for, sales goals, those are going to be impacted by any of the tons of different customer metrics, and identifying, the top ones that actually matter to look at week to week, given the goal that you have, is kind of that's how we would recommend using those 10 minutes, is like, what's our goal and how are we tracking against that using the user feedback that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm sure you'll share some examples and we'll look forward to that.
Yeah, we'll dive in, and we love the questions, so keep them coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now I'm very quickly just going to jump into tools to support this. So obviously there's some tools that you can leverage to collect this data, and we've just listed some of them here. So things like Delighted, Jira, Notion, Hootsuite, Gorgeous, Zendesk, Intercom. Like these are all great, fairly inexpensive too, tools that you can leverage. If you're not in a place where you have like a ton of money yet to invest, that's totally fine. Like I can't tell you how many G sheets I've made of, customer feedback, and even just in Notion, like starting a document and just like, all right, here's the commonly asked questions I'm getting all the time. Let me start to like create an FAQ for this eventually. So there's just, simple things you can do to easily leverage these. And at the end of the day, what's really important is that you do find an easy way to aggregate them so that the collection becomes simpler over time. And again, that could be eventually done in a larger tool like a Doma or a Tableau. But, for now, a G Sheet can work just great. And when it comes to this, your CRM can be a critical tool. If you're not in a place where you're ready to invest in one yet, that's totally fine. Again, I've started with all my customers like on one big, G sheet, and that's where I kept track of them. But at the end of the day, when you do start to invest in a CRM and you're ready to take that step, you want to think about all these direct integrations. Often CRMs can not only integrate tools, but they can replace tools, ultimately saving you money. So just something for the future as you scale, as you grow, like, definitely think about that factor, and it will just make, your life easier, and then put all that data in one place for you. So it's very easy to aggregate and understand.
We're going to dive into kind of what you guys sounds like are wondering about, is how to actually integrate it into your team. So first and foremost, making it available. Whatever you have, just make it transparent. Customer feedback is it's an important piece to almost every team's ultimate output. And it's every team's responsibility. Just about every team we've ever worked with has parts of the organization that's collecting, that's in that loop in some way, whether that's, getting feedback on the acquisition side. They're going to have information about what's working and what's not, and ultimately understanding, what messaging worked or drove great customers versus, drove trouble issue customers. So really every team needs this information and should be relying on it to make decisions. On the cadence side, a short and sweet 10-minute, 15-minute review on a weekly basis is highly recommended. On a monthly basis, you can dive a little bit deeper. But again, this shouldn't be, the amount of effort being put into this shouldn't feel preventative to use it. So make it light, just get started. It doesn't have to be perfect on day one. And then on a quarterly basis, you can dive even deeper. And that might be where you're doing some customer interviews, you're taking the time to actually digest a bit more on the product usage side. You're able to dive deeper into cohort analysis, things like that. Might not be done on a weekly basis, but on a quarterly basis, then you'll have enough time to actually have seen the results of those tests, improvements, changes, sales strategies, etc. And then important to talk about, there's a lot of different times to take action, but we're kind of highlighting a few important ones. So when you start hearing the same things, that's a really good indicator to make some changes. We also want to differentiate what we're hearing from great customers, those ideal use cases, and everyone knows who's a dream customer on their team or in their, app, product, service. And if you don't, let's start there. Define that ideal use case. Know who's a great customer, who's using the product. They're happy, they're referring people, they're engaged, right? They're willing to talk with their account manager, or they're willing to participate in a survey. Those types of customers, we want to listen to them, especially not to ignore bad customers, but mostly to understand how we avoid ending up with a customer who's not a great fit, who actually doesn't have the problem that we're solving. This happens a lot, right? We end up with a customer and we've wanted to make the sale, and we made the sale and they're in, but they don't actually want to use it the way it's designed. They're not actually having the problem that we're trying to solve for. So they're asking for custom features. They are giving sales or support a hard time, right? Those customers, we want to understand, we don't want to forget about them. We want to make sure that they're having a good time with us, of course. But we also want to know, how do we avoid attracting more of those? Was that a messaging? Was it a onboarding, right? Maybe they really didn't understand all the features and how to use them, and now they're relying on support service so much to make use for it. So understand, differentiate between great customers and their feedback, and less than great customers and what their feedback is. We also obviously want to understand if top customers, power users, those like people that maybe you know them by name at this point and we love them. We want to listen to them. When you start to see something new with churn, a new pattern, some sort of issue, that could be from a cohort, that could also be just something that's going wrong suddenly later in the process that hasn't been happening. And of course, we want to be collecting reasons why people are canceling or leaving, or not returning, right? If you're not on some sort of subscription or membership. Thinking about market changes, we have to be aware of external factors that clients and customers are navigating, and being aware of that and trying to get ahead of it to the extent that we can. And then, of course, when we're thinking about service or feature changes, improvements, adjustments, that's a great time to make sure that we're really in touch with customers and getting their feedback in the process.
All right, I'm going to jump in with one question related to that about good and bad customers, because this is a real life scenario that I see with several of our portfolio companies. The scenario I'm talking about is these early stage companies who are considering going, okay, and then they started to get some interest from very large enterprise clients or potential clients, and like as the two of you may have experienced, a lot of they require certain customizations or additional feature requirements that the team or the existing company has not yet developed. So how do you not necessarily differentiate between a bad customer in that sense, but prioritize what to focus on? Because we don't want necessarily our portfolio companies to become the custom dev shop of one account, right? So
Yes.
Have you guys experienced that before? What are some of your recommendations for recognizing and how to manage those types of conversations?
Yeah, I think every team navigates this, no matter the scale, right? There's always something big and shiny ahead of us. At the early stage, it can be devastating, right? When it goes so far. I have personally experienced this one where it's like, oh my gosh, what just happened the last 4 months? We've gone so far down this product roadmap that we weren't interested in, and none of our other customers are interested in either. So first and foremost, we love this basic chart. It seems rudimentary, I know, but actually these kind of having this discipline in doing these exercises, even if it seems a little business school 101, take the step, take the time to do this, map it out, put these things on an impact and effort graph. It doesn't have to be this one, but some sort of brief analysis of really what the impact is and how you're measuring that impact. And if that goal right now is revenue, if it's, keeping the company afloat, well, sure, we might have to think about something that maybe is adjacent to ideally where our product roadmap is going. Having a roadmap, having a vision for the product is also an important piece. It doesn't mean that we're going to follow it, above all, and we're not willing to pivot and we're not willing to make adjustments, but having some perspective is important. And that's setting up, your company mission and values and vision. That work is formative. It can always be adjusted, but having something to start with really lets you have a perspective and make better decisions. And when you're actually making the decision with all the information, this can take a 30-minute exercise of founders going through this sort of conversation. And at least then you're making the decision. You're actually making the decision. You're not getting sucked in. And then thinking about what is on that product roadmap and if that's been informed by customers already. So if you know that what you're looking to build has already been, are already features that other people have requested, and it happens that, this whale of a deal happens to want one of those features or a group of them, that could be really ideal. It's also it's worth noting that in the early stages, these bigger companies might be willing to get more creative and fund some of that work. So, don't be afraid to ask. Oftentimes these bigger teams have the budgets. They're just not, they don't think like we think. So they're not going to offer it, but talking about it and, not thinking about it as long-term dev shop, of course, but if someone is willing to fund, something you wanted to build anyways, that's a great way to take advantage of a helpful partnership. Does that answer questions, Tony?
Yeah, I think those are some really good recommendations.
Yeah, I was
just great. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to add to that too. One other thing that I think, we see works well too, when you do have those, that whale that comes and says, I want this, this, and that, even just asking other customers, hey, if we built these features, would they be useful to you? Because sometimes they may not have as much of an immediate use case for it, but they could think of other creative ways it works well for them, even if they're on a smaller scale. So it, like Holden was saying on the ask front, it just never hurts to ask others if it would be useful too.
We're going to touch on this quickly, and then we'll get into examples soon. So if there are any questions that you're currently navigating as a team, think about those, send them into Tony. That would be helpful for us as we dive into examples. How to take action. So we want to operate in a test and learn mentality. There's a lot of different frameworks that have fancy names for this. This is just how we're going to talk about it at a high level. Try something, see if it works, make it a standard, or try something else. If we're making it a standard, document it, provide training both for internal team members and customers. And this might sound silly to spend time on documentation in the early stages. I assure you it's really not. Make it simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. You do not have to have a full help center developed. You don't have to have fancy templates. This can be in Notion. These can be Notion pages where your internal employees and your early stage customers can be accessing it. You can just publish the pages. And then importantly, setting these goals that are actually tied to outcomes and results and sharing those among the team so we can measure impact and have everyone bought in on that. That could be a revenue number. It could be product usage numbers. This could be an open rate of email, survey completion rate, but actually knowing what outcome means it's a success ahead of a test is really critical. And these are kind of basic things you guys may be already aware of, but we want to just kind of highlight how important and effective that really is. Kind of doing the basics, talking to customers, setting goals and knowing what you're measuring them against. It's really, really critical, even in the early days. So Sophia's going to dive into the B2B example, and I'm just going to quickly check if there's anyone here in a B2B company that has anything to share related to this.
We do have several B2B companies attending right now. Maybe they're a little bit guys. Okay. So why don't you go ahead again, for those of
Yeah.
you who are listening in, if you are a B2B company and have specific examples, problems, go ahead and type in the chat or Q&A, and then we'll try to address those.
Great. Okay, so hopping in. So this is how we have, actually worked with the B2B SaaS company to establish a customer feedback loop and get it set up. And we started in that ask phase. So we'll go around the wheel and talk through that. So first in the ask phase, we captured support resolution sentiment. So asking for satisfaction scores following support ticket resolution, did things like launch surveys and conducted interviews. So NPS, CSAT, custom survey, those are the ones that we focused on. I know also, NPS kind of gets some flack as more of a vanity metric. And I would agree with that statement. I don't know that it always gives you like the best insight, but I will say from a pure industry standard, from a pure industry perspective, to understand like in your own space how you're stacking up, it is an important metric to have on hand and it's still useful. So say definitely track that one. CSAT is customer satisfaction. And that's just, a quick 1 to 5 scale, and then custom survey. Of course, you can tailor that to specifically what you're looking for. Great times to survey customers are after onboarding, during adoption and after adoption, and then throughout steady state. I know it can be so easy once you have a customer in steady state that is up and running and things are good to just kind of be like, okay, put them on a back burner because now I need to focus on all these other clients and getting them up and running. But you don't want to lose sight of what is their sentiment, because as we know in SaaS, we are on often subscription models. And at the end of the day, when a customer churns, we may not have sight of that, right? It may come out of the blue and we're not expecting it. So anything to proactively understand that is great. And then also too, when it comes to getting some real-time feedback, one thing that we love to do is just have product like take a customer through a new feature or some new things in a demo environment, and just to get some real-time insight into it. Super simple, super useful. Your best customers will do this. You don't obviously want to keep asking the same one every time, but if you mix it up, customers are usually very willing to do it. And then
I'm just going to jump in for one thing.
Yeah.
If you're finding that customers aren't willing to, that's an indicator something's going wrong there. So if you are having trouble getting people willing to spend 30 minutes with you, dive in deeper on that.
And then we ask for reviews. So G2, Capterra, like those are great, places where a lot of customers would typically go to understand in their sales cycle or in pre-sale, like, hey, is this a good, product for me? Does this make sense? What are other people saying about it? I want to know. So if we saw some good NPS or CSAT or custom survey results, we'd send a trigger to those other clients and say, hey, or I'm sorry, to those same clients and say, hey, would you be willing to leave a review here? Would mean a lot to us. And, 9 out of 10 times when you add how much it would mean to you, they go and do it, which is great. And then also tracking churn. So as much as you want to understand why customers are buying, why they're working with you, you really want to make sure you understand why they're leaving. And you want to get that reason. And I know it sometimes can be difficult because I feel like clients are sometimes afraid to like tell the truth here, or like they sugarcoat like some version of it. But as much as you can ask questions and dig in and even just say, hey, look, like I sincerely care. Like you can just tell me blatantly if you didn't enjoy your product experience. Like I want to know that. I want to know that information. So please, can you just give me the, the full story on why you guys churned? And as you start to track that, that is so incredibly helpful, because then you can mitigate, those reasons that you're seeing churn as you, evolve. And when you can obviously, through people, process, product, work on ways to reduce that. And then also building a customer health score. So this is another one that is really important here. So why I really love this is because this can be a great revenue forecaster for you and for your team. And why this is so important is because you're talking about the main reasons why you're going to retain someone or you're going to lose someone. And you're going to get a pulse and you're going to get a sentiment and an understanding of that throughout the life cycle of this customer. So as you can see in this example here, I picked, 4 criteria that worked really well for this particular client and talked about that. And that was, weekly usage, CSAT score, NPS score, and executive turnover. So I knew if my client was in the product weekly, That's fantastic. That shows that they like this is a critical, important tool for them. I also knew that if my executive sponsor left, like, oh shoot, like we might actually lose this account. Whether or not everyone really loves us, it's because someone new is coming in, they may have a tool they like better, they may, want to cut budgets, like, you never know. So what we did is then assigned like a weighting system to it. So weekly usage, getting the most points, CSAT, NPS, we liked the range that they were at anyway, so kept them there. And then executive turnover got points, based on a yes, no scenario. And you can see in the sample here, you just take, okay, what's my weighting system, my total possible points out of where we actually scored, and then that's the percentage of the likelihood that they are going to renew. So in this case, 95% renewal, super healthy client in the green, good to go. We're not as worried about this one. So it just helps you, get a good pulse of kind of where you're at today with your clients. And then collect. So a couple things here that are really important. And when it comes to success alignment, I do want to emphasize this. If you are, in this tech B2B SaaS space, when you start the engagement with your customer, I cannot emphasize enough to you to get them to tell you in their own words why they bought and what success looks like for them. If you do that at the onset and you have that understanding and you're tracking that, your whole engagement is going to go so much smoother than if you don't know that answer. And I know it feels a little awkward to ask because like, you know what your software does. So that's the solution you're providing. So that's why they bought. But when you get them to tell them in their words, it then puts it in the context of their business, of their company, of how they are using it, how they are working on it. And it will give you such great insight into that. So when you are kicking off an engagement or you have that first initial call, double checking this is so important, and documenting it is also important. So what we do is if we don't have a CRM, we just literally pop it in the G sheet and keep track of it. What that also does later is as you're going back and you're actually looking at like, okay, here's what customers said in their words, why they bought. This is great language to actually use in marketing and sales materials in the pre-sale phase, because you're relating your product to your customer. You're not just telling them like, you're talking to them about their business, not about your business. And that is such a shift that it just makes such a huge impact. So success alignment is so critical when you collect that and, you keep track of it. Super helpful. As I mentioned, the health scores, easily track that and build that out in a G sheet. Super simple. Product feedback, FAQs. Again, you can set up a quick little page in Notion if you have Jira or Confluence. In the example I'm talking about here, we did put it there because that's where the product and engineering team was. We wanted them to see that feedback. We wanted it to be transparent, so it lived there. But again, you can just throw it in a real easy tool. Surveys and interviews. You can also, track these through the thing like Typeform or Delighted and actually have it in there. Or you could simply, do a Google form. That works as well. But just where, having that data aggregated in one place makes it super simple to take out and analyze. And then reviews. Of course, these are going to be on third-party sites, but you can just go to those third-party sites, take screenshots, look and see if anyone posted anything this past month or whatever it may be, and then you have it there. Lastly, obviously, if you can leverage a BI tool, that's great to aggregate everything in one place, or a CRM like I was talking about. If not, a G sheet is totally fine and it works just as well. When it comes to analyzing and planning on a weekly basis, you want to be doing some monitoring. And this is where, we were talking about, it doesn't have to take a ton of time, but just like doing some quick little pulse checks. So looking at customer feedback or any survey feedback in real time, addressing any negative responses. You want to do that quickly. You don't want a customer to be unhappy and they just like, it gets sat on and they're just sitting there stewing and probably getting more upset. If you get positive responses, this is where it goes back to that notify piece. Just thanking someone, like a quick, like, hey, thanks so much for taking this. Heard your feedback. We're going to leverage it. Like, thank you. Again, the more that you acknowledge that we're actually listening, the more you're going to see feedback coming in. The second is documenting the consistent feedback for customers. So again, if you've heard something like this is the 5th time this week, somebody's had this problem or asked this question, and working that into maybe a product roadmap or an FAQ page or whatever it may be. Checking out support tickets or where you've seen issues. If you don't have, support built out yet, totally fine. But again, like where are those red flags coming? Or have, 3 customers emailed us this morning saying, hey, I'm having this issue. And now it's only a matter of time because we looked into it and it's system-wide that the other 10 are going to come and say, hey, I'm having this issue too. So just a proactive, outreach to them. I'm also looking at product usage. And if you do see that, oh man, over the last 3 weeks, like this client has really dropped off in terms of usage, let's like figure out, what we can do to get that back up. So just again, a quick pulse check on that too is super helpful. And then on a monthly basis, I did write this example out as if, it's a big, bigger company with a lot of different teams and people, but also totally fine if not, because basically what you want to do at the end of the day is just put a report together, analyze your findings, get, everybody else involved who impacts it. So typically like product engineering is going to have, more of it, sales and marketing as well. And even, company-wide, if there's pertinent findings, recommendations, key information that everybody should know, there's no reason why everybody shouldn't know it. Like it's everybody's business. It's everybody's thing to be responsible for. So you can disseminate that. Finance and accounting, they can even, again, going back to those churn renewal forecasts, health scores, like it can be used for forecasting and for their planning purposes. So there's definitely ways that, again, this can all be leveraged. And then on the people team side, this one I think is often a question from people team members of like, well, how do I impact the customer experience? And it's like, but you do, and it's one of those things like Holden was talking about earlier. When you have happy clients, you have happier employees. And it's even, goes back to the product experience, right? Like if you are working on a product every day and you're logging in and it's just not working and it's taking forever to do things and it's so frustrating, like your customers are going to have the same experience, right? And at the end of the day, when everybody is frustrated and upset, like that hurts morale, that hurts culture. So of course it's good for, a team member who's kind of responsible for that piece of the company to understand that and be like, okay, how can we help make this more positive or turn this around or, do whatever we can to fix it. So that's how it ends up impacting everybody. And these are, again, just ways that you can immediately leverage it on a monthly basis. And then quarterly and annual, this is also, same thing. So you take all those monthly reports. What did we see month over month? How do we aggregate that into insights into the quarter? So, you do that analysis, looking at it in aggregate, sharing that again with your customer-facing teams, throughout the leadership team, anything, again, company-wide that's pertinent and important, and then using that to actually plan things in the product roadmap or, overall goal planning for your next fiscal, whatever it may be. But there's, again, just awesome data in there that you want to make sure you're leveraging on a quarterly and annual basis too. And then when it comes to implementing, I wanted to give like one just really quick, simple, like real example here. Well, those were all real examples, but another one that is just super simple. So the CS org, let's say, like, again, we're getting feedback about this one feature. It's so confusing to customers. We hear it every week. We have to explain it 10 times. They keep asking the same question about the name of this field and why it exists. So we tell product's like, oh, okay, you're getting that from a lot of customers. We'll change it. Let's change it to this. Let's add a little info eye icon that when you mouse over, it'll explain to customers how they should use it. On the next slide, if you go to, then product would say, okay, like here's CS, like it's going to be made. Here's when it will be made. It's going to be in the next sprint. This is the release date of that. So that's when you can expect it to go live. Marketing will let you guys know. We gave you a heads up because now you can update your feature release email just to further demonstrate that the feedback was heard and it was addressed. And then from a product standpoint, we're going to put this in Pendo and it's going to track, and then we'll see if we have increased usage. And actually, 2 weeks later, wow, it's increased by 50%. So we've been, actually seeing some great results from changing that, and CS, like, that's just what we saw. So again, super simple, and you don't need all these teams to do this, right? So you can just literally like make these changes and let your customers know in real time too. But just an example of how this works and how, again, just from simple, quick, easy analysis, you can, make a big change.
Sophia, and also just noting that while we've organized this in terms of teams, your team might not have all these functions. Someone is wearing those hats. So think about it in terms of the role that they're, the ultimate, ownership of areas of the business. And when you do these practices early on, they're much easier to implement as you're scaling, right? You're not having to retrain your team that now we send a nice email and we document it, we share it with our team. Then we share it with customers. When you're doing that on an ongoing basis, one, your customers are going to think way more highly of you. They're going to be really impressed that this scrappy small startup that they met at some event or whatever is actually like running like a real team. That's going to be well received by customers. And also it's just going to make your life a lot easier down the line and make it, those growing pains are going to be smaller and less painful. So I'm going to dive into a consumer example. This is an active client for 3 years. We love them. They got acquired. And this is how we help them scale the business. They were a very early team. They actually were originally a Mucker company also. I forgot about that. And so they took this very seriously. They were kind of a dream client of ours. So I'm going to dive in. Does anyone have a consumer business they're working on right now? Any challenges that they're navigating? Does anyone chat those in, Tony?
We do have questions coming in, but we just wanted, there's 9 minutes left. Let's just go through it.
I'm going to run through it quickly.
Questions.
You guys you can always read more at the end. So on the ask, we sent first-time users a personalized email and text flow. We love plain text emails. I know kind of everyone is doing it, but I don't think everyone is doing it well. So there's still room to do email well. The saying is abs are made in the kitchen. Well, revenue is also still made in email. We need to get this right. So understanding the intention behind their purchase or joining the membership, offering help with onboarding, and doing it from a personal email. Obviously, that's just an alias to your support or whatever other, generic internal team email that you have, but making it look like it's coming from a real person. It can be someone actually on your team. It does not have to be. That's kind of a brand values assessment for you. I do recommend across the board for B2B and consumer that we have done extensive study on this, and you need to pick a traditionally female sounding name, and you need to pick something that everyone can spell. Do not pick Holden. It's a terrible name to choose for this. Sophia is a great name. If you need help picking a name, there are tools. ChatGPT can give you a great female generic name that people like. You don't have to come up with something special, but if you want to think about what feels on brand, go for it. We did in-app prompts to guide them through key actions we know increase retention and happiness. So on the early stage, you're getting to know what's working. As you're scaling, you actually want to automate that, right? So we want to have an in-app guide if that's helpful. We know that signing up for our text increases their LTV and ultimate happiness. Following on social in this case was important because it was in the fashion space. And so actually getting styling recommendations and things like that are helpful. And there are specific features that if they engaged with, we knew dramatically increased their LTV, because in prior years, we have been tracking what actually is driving LTV, so we can understand that and then implement automation around it. We collected reviews around first delivery and individual products that they received. We also did CSAT for every interaction with support, and an NPS at 60 days. Depending on your business, you want to play with the timing of this. In this case, because churn at 1 month was so high, depending on what acquisition was doing at the time, we felt that NPS was only relevant for people who stayed on at least 60 days. We also did monthly small group panels and rotated who owned that panel. So merchandising might own it 1 month, acquisition team might own it 1 month, retention, marketing might own it a different month, member delight or customer support might own it a different month. And that was really effective in getting the whole company involved in this. We had quarterly one-on-one interviews with about 10 users. Again, 10 users, 15 to 30 minutes each. It does not have to take weeks and weeks to gather these interviews. And we did about 2 surveys a year. On the collection side, we had a weekly report that was one place for all KPIs related to users. This was sent to the company via Slack once a week, and then a kind of cross-functional leadership team reviewed this live in person. It had key usage data, certain engagement, features used. It had reviews info, survey info, kind of what you would assume would be in anyone's KPIs. We did a quarterly comprehensive report, and that dove much deeper into product usage and feedback across channels, as well as summary information around what we received through the panels, the changes that we were making based on the panel feedback specifically, and what the ultimate results were. Being diligent in this with the organization cannot be overstated. Teams that run like this are going to have better performance. Following some of these guidelines is really going to make a huge difference to your business. And you don't have to have fancy tools to do this. Notion, Dovetail can be great resources to collect that feedback and keep it in a useful location. This team was exceptional at being committed to their goals and setting those goals based on feedback. So this has to be founder-led. If you're trying to convince your founder that we should be listening to customers, we got to back up a little bit, right? We want to know our users, and we really want to care about our users. I see teams regularly that have lost sight of who they're building for. And first and foremost, we've got to love them and we've got to know them. And if there's not that love and care on the team, fix that first, right? Like, let's get reconnected to that. One user research project, interviewing 20 customers, even on a consumer app, 20 can make a huge difference for your team. Quarterly ROC setting, we use the ROC system. It doesn't matter which system, just pick one and actually do that. Having product involved, sales acquisitions, all of these teams should be relying on information. And if they're not, we're collecting the wrong information. So understand what those teams need to make their decisions or to plan for the future. And the impact of these clear goals, really, we've talked about it a lot, and it's so important. Implementing and actually, involving the teams in this goal setting process and in this quarterly and monthly reporting is really important. And then notifying. So email updates, text updates, social posts, a founder letter and a video, that can go a long way. And like Sophia said, on the B2B side, people really love to know that you've taken their feedback and have actually implemented changes. Everyone sends surveys now, but I almost never receive any follow-up with, here's what we learned and here's what we're doing about it. And that's really, you want to train your customers, the earlier the better. You want to kind of train them like a puppy to take the actions that you want, which is engaging with their surveys. And the reward for them is hearing that you took it seriously and you made these changes. They know that not everything's going to change just because they shared it, but that you're sharing and kind of wrapping up that experience for them will go a long way. Okay, a couple quick takeaways that you guys could do this week. Align on your goals. It's January. This is a great time. Convenient. It's not too late. If you haven't set goals, you still have time. And understanding how the team is currently leveraging customer and product data to achieve those goals and how the team's kind of thinking about it. Have a 10-minute talk this week. Add something. You do not have to build an entire loop to start gathering information and improving your experience. Add in one concierge email. Try launching NPS or CES, customer effort score. That can be a great one. A post onboarding survey. Such a great tool and so easy to add. And reach out to 2 customers. Try and get 30 minutes of feedback this month. Start a conversation. Sit down with the team, even if it's 3 of you. Understand the takeaways that you are learning from this time, hopefully something, and have a 10-minute discussion about what they think about leveraging this data and how they'd like to in the future. Okay, I ran through that. Hopefully we have a little bit of time for some questions.
I do want, we are running out of time, so I want to wrap up, but two questions really that are related, but that I want to make sure we address because it's really good. We didn't get to talk about it. So that question is, we hear a lot from customers who are either super users or those customers or unhappy and complain a lot. And there's a lot of potentially users that are in that steady state, or actually let's take that use case that are chugging along, but they are quiet. Do you have any recommendations on how to get perhaps the vast majority of your users or customers actively providing feedback on a regular basis to engage with you. And, some of our companies and people have mentioned, yeah, we tried running surveys, we tried, so response. How do you incentivize customers who are typically not engaged outside of product?
Yeah. So first, you're not alone. This happens a lot. People are overwhelmed right now. There's a lot of requests. And like we kind of talked about, like there's not a lot of follow through with them, but people are requesting a lot from customers across the board. So first and foremost, personal emails and a phone call. I know it sounds crazy, but actually picking up the phone and calling someone can really go a long way. It's not comfortable being on the phone with a stranger. No one really enjoys that. I mean, I'm an extreme extrovert, so I'm fine. But like most people don't love doing that. It's hard. Even for great product leaders that we work with, they might actually have never done it. So picking up the phone, calling that contact, leaving a quick message. Hey, it's Holden, from Rethink. I wanted to touch base with a couple of customers this month. I know you're so busy. If you could take 15 minutes, like I just have a few questions and we'd really love to get your personal feedback, and add something specific to their business. Your business use case is interesting because, and I want to know your feedback on this because. Make it specific to them. That can be via email and phone call. If you're knowing that they're in the product, get an in-product survey. It doesn't have to be 15 questions. It can be one important question that you have right now, and put it on a page that they're already engaging in. So if they're on, their dashboard for your product, or if you're a consumer, maybe they're in their account profile, or they're looking at orders or upcoming shipments, put it in there. Put it where you already know that they're spending time, and try to make it as personal as possible. Getting a few good feedback touch points is more important than getting, hundreds of like mediocre yes/no answers.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.